Hello guys and welcome to today's session. Today we are going to talk about endpoint privilege management. So guys, I've been wanting to do this tutorial ever since EPM was announced in private preview and then in public preview and now GA'd, as this is one of the hot topics. So in this session we are going to first understand the need of privilege management, what exactly endpoint privilege management is, and how does Intune work with EPM. Then we'll take a look over what are the advantages of using EPM from the EPM solution of Microsoft in comparison to EPM from other compete third-party products. Then we'll talk about how we can enable EPM from the Intune console. We'll talk about what our deployment strategy should look like, what is the working concept. We'll understand the architecture of EPM. We'll take a look over the logs. We'll take a look over the registry. Most importantly, we'll understand the flow during an agent installation. We'll understand the background and the foreground flow as far as policy delivery and policy processing is concerned. We'll troubleshoot the flow. We'll discuss some other good to have features in the EPM product which are not there as of today. We'll take a look over the reporting. We'll discuss some other pointers and then we'll head straight into the demo. So again, this is going to be a jam-packed session, and as I said, this is one of the hot topics because EPM is something that almost all the organizations in enterprise use to some extent or the other. Why? That is something that we are going to see very shortly. So for us to understand why do we need endpoint privilege management, let me describe it this way. Security admins in an organization always feel that end users should never have admin access, because if end users have admin access, then the devices and in turn the enterprise is left vulnerable, because only if end users have admin access in the machine, only then they can click on a virus and install a virus, or click on a malicious link and make some system level changes in the laptop, right? So security admins never want to give admin privileges to users who are using the laptop. However, the users who are using the laptop, they always want admin privileges. Now more so, because now the users are accustomed of using their devices at home, and when they are using their devices at the home, they are admin in their device. So now they're expecting same kind of privilege or same kind of experience in their work related laptop as well. So this brings us to the point that where do we draw the line? Do we make the end users an admin on the machine, or do we not make them an admin? If we are making them an admin, then we are not making our security admins very happy, right? Because the security admin is always going to fear that the end user might open up a spam email, click on some link, install some virus in the device, which might then just replicate across the entire organization. On the other hand, if we don't make the end users admins, if we leave them as standard users, then the end users are always going to complain, saying that they are not as productive as they would want to be. They don't have the privileges. They are not able to use the tools that they want to use to be productive. They are not able to do the installation of softwares that they would want to install, right? And hence this dilemma, and hence we have to figure out how to maintain this balance. Now, if the end users are local admins in the machines, then they can do all these and much more. They can install or run unauthorized processes or applications. They can install malware, disable security settings, system settings, perform file system changes, and change the desktop configuration to what they would want it to be. Now, the IT admin might not be happy with all these things being performed in the device. So the goal of EPM is to find the right balance and find it at a cheap scale. So what EPM is trying to do is EPM is trying to maintain the scale. EPM is trying to make sure that the end user is not an admin in the machine, but they are not a standard user at all the time, because if they are a standard user, then the user is complaining that he is not going to be 100% productive. So EPM is trying to find a middle ground over here by implementing least privilege model. So the goal of EPM is finding the balance and finding a cheaper scale and implementing the least privilege model. So what least privilege model means is we should only provide that much of privilege to an end user on a device which he actually needs. So we are providing him the least amount of privilege that an end user needs to be productive on his machine. We are not providing him anything more than that, right? So that is the concept of endpoint privilege management. So the endpoint privilege management is a combination of privilege management and application control. So privilege management says that we should remove, elevate or restrict privileges. So that is exactly what we are doing in EPM. We will see how we are doing it. What we essentially end up doing is we elevate a standard user to an admin, but he is not an admin permanently in the device. He becomes an admin for a specific session, and once that session is over, he goes back to being a normal user. That is what we are doing under privilege management, and it's an application control technology. When I say application control, it only allows trusted application to run as an admin in the machine. So that's the catch here. It's not going to block the launch or running of an application. That is something that is inherently done by app locker. But what EPM is going to do is it's going to only allow trusted application to run as an admin. Whichever application it's not running to allow as an admin, those applications can always run as a standard user. Okay. So this is the concept of endpoint privilege management. The advantages of endpoint privilege management, well, you can just build upon the disadvantages of having a user as an admin, right? So endpoint privilege management can mitigate the following attack vectors: installation of spyware. Well, now the end user cannot install a spyware in the device because end user is no longer an admin in the device, right? He cannot replace the operating system, he cannot disable or uninstall the antivirus, he cannot modify the user accounts, reset the passwords, disable security features. So anything that an admin could do, now because of EPM, the standard user is not able to do that. But then how is this different from not having EPM and then making that user just a standard user? If the user is a standard user and there is no EPM, then the user would not be able to do any admin related activity. However, since we have EPM, even though the user is a standard user, he will be able to do some admin related actions. What are those actions? That is something that we are going to take a look over shortly. Very quickly, the theoretical stuff, let's just get this out of the way very quickly. Key features of EPM: achieve least privilege, making sure that we are providing just enough access to the end user. Seamless application control, everything is seamless. Auditing and reporting is there so that the admin can later on see how many elevations have happened. It provides the threat analytics as well, enables the productivity, and helps us deliver key insights. Now, what are the advantages of using EPM solution from Microsoft? So until now, we should have understood that why do we need endpoint privilege management? We need it so that we don't have to make the end users an admin on the device, because if the end user is an admin, there are very good amount of chances that end users are not as tech savvy as we would want them to be. And even if they are, we always expose our organization, right, to threats, to external threats. So that is why we are not making them an admin. But since we are not making them an admin, we don't want to limit the activities that the end user can do as well. Hence, we are using endpoint privilege management so that the end user becomes admin for selective actions only. Okay. Now EPM as a solution has existed since very long, and many third-party products are out there in the market, like CyberArk and Beyond Trust, which have provided their own endpoint privilege management functionality on Windows device. Now, what is the advantage of making use of EPM from Microsoft with Intune? Well, these are the advantages. First is, this is an integrated first party solution, meaning the EPM that we have from Microsoft, that can be managed completely from the Intune console. So you don't need to have a third party console in place. Secondly, you don't need to have any third party agent installed in the device. Well, obviously there is an agent that needs to be installed. It's the EPM agent. It's made by Microsoft, but it's a first party agent, right? First party agent being installed on the operating system. It's not a third party agent, right? There are no compatibility issues as well, because every time a new operating system comes up, internally Microsoft is going to test the working of that operating system with the EPM agent, and only a newer version of EPM agent is going to come out, right? So you won't see any compatibility issues between the operating system and the EPM agent, because Microsoft is owning both of them. And as I said, it's integrated with Intune. So everything that you want to do as far as EPM management is concerned, you can do it from the Intune portal itself, which again means you don't have to manage one more console. Now let's understand where does EPM fit in the landscape. Now from Microsoft, we have EPM, which we are talking about right now. And then Microsoft also has a technology called App Locker and WDAC. And then we have something called labs. So EPM, as we have seen, it is used for elevation from standard user to admin for a specific application, right? Meaning the user will be a normal user for everything else in the device, but only when he is trying to run a specific application or install a specific application or launch a specific binary, only then he becomes an admin. Otherwise, he is a standard user. The goal is reducing the attack on devices by implementing the model of least privilege. Now the second is App Locker or WDAC. Using App Locker, we are controlling which app can run in the device and which cannot. So, from Intune also we have an option of deploying App Locker XMLs, and in that XML we in a way whitelist or blacklist applications. Whichever applications are allowed to run as per the XML, only those applications can be launched. Whichever applications are not allowed to run, we cannot launch them. The goal of using App Locker is reducing the attack on the device by limiting which application can run. And then we have labs. The purpose of using labs is managing the passwords of the local accounts that are created in the device. So this slide should help us understand the difference between these three technologies, all offered by Microsoft. All three of them can be managed from Intune itself. Now these are all complementing technologies, so you can use all three of them together, but they are not dependent technologies. As in, if you want to make use of EPM, you don't have to necessarily make use of WDAG or App Locker or labs.
So 1,000 feet overview of EPM would be, think of EPM as just-in-time privileges for standard users so that they can become admin on the machine for a specific application. Meaning the users are going to request access when they run or install a specific application, and just for that specific application they will be becoming an admin, and once that app session is done, they are demoted to being a standard user again.
So a little while back, Microsoft announced the Advanced Management Solution or the Advanced Suite, which contains a whole bunch of features. EPM is one of those. There are other features as well. I'll be doing deep dive on each of them, like remote help, MAM tunnel, app patching, cloud PKI, advanced analytics. But right now we want to talk about EPM. Okay. So EPM can be implemented, endpoint privilege management of Microsoft can be implemented from the Intune portal. It's available as a suite. So if you want to make use of all these features, you can purchase the suite. We'll talk about the licensing in the suite later on, but you can get that as a part of the suite, or you can get, if you just want to make use of endpoint privilege management, you can get that as standalone as well. EPM provides seamless management. It's built in and powered by Intune. So all the policy deployment as well as agent installation, all of that is getting triggered from Intune console itself. We are getting a rich set of insights, and EPM is a tool set that is designed to make removing administrative privileges from a device a reality. Okay. Alright, so now let's very quickly, before we understand how EPM works and what are the things that we have to do, let's get the understanding of the requirements and the pricing. So if you are running with Windows 10 or Windows 11, then you have to, depending upon which version you are running with, if you're running with 20H2 or later, or if you're running with 21H2, then you have to install a KB. That KB can be downloaded from the Microsoft catalog and can be installed manually. If you're running with later versions, then you don't need to worry about this. Now once the KB has been installed, now the next thing is taking care of the licensing part. Now obviously the device needs to be enrolled to Intune. Does not matter how you have done the enrollment, whether the device is auto-piloted or manually enrolled or group policy enrolled or co-management enrolled or provisioning package enrolled or you name it. Okay, doesn't matter how the device was enrolled. Now if the device was enrolled, then the user who has enrolled the device would have had a EMS E3 or M365 E3, or he would have had some kind of Intune Plan 1 license, right? Now the normal EMS E3 or E5 or A3 or A5 or the Intune standalone license does not contain the license for endpoint privilege management. I know this might sound strange if you are hearing this for the first time, and this is how and where Microsoft Intune has announced the concept of having multiple licenses. So until now, all the new features that were coming up in Intune, you would get the advantages of all those features with the existing license itself. But with the launch of EPM and some other products, you don't get the ability to, like when I say some other product, I mean these products, and there will be few other as well. So think of these products as add-ons. And you cannot enjoy these add-ons with the same license. When I say same license, I mean the same Intune standalone license or the EMS E3 or E5 or A3 or A5 license. You need to purchase a separate license if you want to make use of these products. Now there are two ways that you can get licensed for these products. Either you can purchase the license for Intune Suite. Now Intune Suite is a bundle which contains all these features. It contains remote help, EPM, advanced analytics, advanced app management, cloud PKI, and a lot of other products. So either you can get, you obviously need to have Intune Plan 1 license already. When I say Plan 1, everything that is written over here comes under Plan 1. So you need to have Plan 1 plus either you can have Intune Suite, but if you are taking Intune Suite, you are going to get all these add-ons. But let's say that you don't want all these add-ons, you only want endpoint privilege management. Then instead of taking Intune Suite, you can just take the license for endpoint privilege management. Okay, so the way it works is, again, number one, you already need to have a Intune Plan 1 license. So P1 is needed, and then number two, along with P1, you have option of either taking the Intune Suite or you have the option of taking any standalone. Either you can just take the license for endpoint privilege management or you can pick any of these products. Now obviously you might ask that why should I just pick one and why should I not go for the entire suite? Well, obviously the entire suite is going to be more expensive as compared to if you pick just one product, right? So yeah, so this is how it's going to be. This is how the licensing works. The thing that I wanted to clarify here is just having P1 is not going to cut it, because P1 is only going to provide you the basic manageability. Everything that is written over here, this is a part of Intune suite. For this you need to have a separate license. You can either have the entire Intune suite license, which means you can test out and implement all the features that are written over here, or you can just pick the feature that you want and then pay the license for that. Okay. So this is the official documentation, which is also talking about the same thing. If you have Intune Plan 1 license, it is priced at $8. And Intune Plan 1, how do you get Intune Plan 1? You can get Intune Plan 1 is like getting M365 E3 or E5 or EMS E3 or E5 or A3 or A5. But this is only providing you the basic device management capability, as well as this contains the Azure P1 licenses as well. So Azure P2 licenses as well. So you can make use of conditional access also. But just having Intune Plan 1, as I said earlier, it's not going to provide you these 5 or 6 advanced features. If you want to avail these 5 or 6 advanced features, you have two options. Either you can go with Intune Suite. If you go with Intune Suite, you will have to pay $10 extra per user, which means how much amount are you paying now? For each user, you are paying $8 to get the P1 license, and then $10 to get the Intune Suite license. So in total, you are paying $18. Or the other option is you can just pay the $8 for getting the EMS E3 or E5 or A3 or A5 license, and then just get one feature as the add-on. Like, let's say you just want to try out the Intune, the EPM. You don't want to try out the other things that are there in the Intune suite, then you just get the license for EPM as an add-on, which is available for $3. So if you do this, how much are you paying now? You're paying $8 plus $3, which is $11. So I hope now you would have understood the difference between this and this. If you're taking the entire suite, you are paying $8 plus $10, that is $18. Over here, you are paying $8 plus $3, which is $11. Obviously, if you are going with this one, you are getting the entire EMS E3 or E5 benefit, and you are getting the benefit of all these features. But if you are going with this one and paying $11, you are getting EMS E3, E5 entire benefit, and you are just subscribing for endpoint privilege management. You are not going to get these features. Okay. All right. So that should explain the pricing part. I wanted to spend some extra time on this because this is the first time this has happened in Intune. Until now, all the new features would get added into Intune itself, but this is the first time a new kind of licensing has come up. And the reason why this has come up is EPM, even though we are deploying EPM from Intune, this in itself is a technology, right? So it makes sense to have a additional licensing in place for EPM on top of the normal Intune licensing that we have, because you are going a step ahead and making use of advanced manageability solutions in the device, right? For which you would have anyways paid for a third-party product. The only thing that you're doing now is, instead of paying a third-party product, you're utilizing the Microsoft product. You're paying less, and it's integrated with Intune. Therefore, you have the confidence of Microsoft. How do you get that? So you can get the trial license for EPM as well. So all you have to do is you have to go to your M365 admin center, and over there, if you go to your products, or if you want to purchase a service, then you just search for the word endpoint, and then you should be able to see Microsoft Intune Endpoint Privilege Management. Just have to click on the details, and then you will have an option of getting a trial. I've already taken a trial, therefore it tells me manage trial. If you have not taken a trial, then it will tell you to subscribe for a trial. So you can subscribe for a trial, and once you subscribe for a trial, it will tell you that your order has been confirmed, and then you can check out. And then the 250 licenses for Intune Endpoint Privilege Management with 90 days subscription will show up in your portal, and you can start assigning it to the users. Alright, so now let's talk about how we can roll out endpoint privilege management. So the way it works is, as I have already said, EPM is deployed and it works from the Intune portal itself. So all you have to do is you have to go to the Intune portal. On the left hand side, you will be able to see a blade called Endpoint Security. When you go into Endpoint Security, you see a lot of tabs. This is a new tab. So Endpoint Privilege Management is a new tab that shows up over here. We now get a banner as well that EPM is generally available, and from here we can make EPM related policies. Now there are two kind of policies related to endpoint privilege management that we have to create. One is something called elevation setting policy, and the second is something called elevation rule policy, and we are going to understand both of them in detail. So elevation setting policy, think of this as the on off switch. If you want to turn on endpoint privilege management in the device, then this is the policy that you have to set. Once the elevation setting policy has been set and once EPM has been turned on in the device, then you have to make a elevation rule policy wherein you specify that which application is going to run as an admin and which is not. So remember, what are we doing with the EPM solution again? Using the EPM solution, we are making sure that the end user who is a standard user becomes an admin when he runs a specific application. So where do I define that which are those specific applications for which the end user is going to become an admin? We determine that in the elevation rule policy. But elevation rule policy, what is it doing? It's making a standard user an admin for a specific application, which is an endpoint, which is an EPM feature. So you can make use of elevation rule policy only after EPM is turned on in the machine, right? It's equivalent to a firewall, right? Take an example of a firewall. Only after you have turned on the local firewall, then you can make rules in the firewall, right? That which port, which firewall rule inbound is allowed, which firewall rule outbound is allowed, and on which port, right? But for that, you will have to turn on the feature first, right? Similarly, turning on the EPM is something that is done by elevation setting policy. So over here you see the elevation setting policy. This is from wherein we are turning on the EPM. So the moment we turn it on, it's just a toggle. The moment we toggle this to yes, we just have to deploy it to a security group. It can be users or devices. Now the moment this policy goes down to the device, there's a lot of magic that happens under the hood. We are going to track it via the logs and the registry to understand what is happening behind the hood. But what this settings policy is going to do is it's going to enable the EPM feature by installing an agent, creating a service, and a lot more. Once that is done, then we create a elevation rule policy and assign it to a user or a device. And that elevation rule policy contains the metadata that for which application the end user is going to become an admin, who inherently is just a standard user in the device. Okay, so I hope we have understood the difference between this and this. Once we do the demo, we will actually understand both of these in detail. So this is what a endpoint privilege management elevation setting policy look like. So in the elevation setting policy, it's a toggle wherein we are saying that EPM needs to be enabled. These two are just sending of data, so we are going to ignore these two things. Okay, now this is something that is very, very important. So the way this works is, first we are going to enable the endpoint privilege management, and once we have enabled endpoint privilege management, now all the agent installation, service creation is done. Now there is something called default elevation response. So let's say that until now I have not created anything else. I just enabled the endpoint privilege management, and then in the default elevation response, I select deny all request. So, and then I just save this policy, assign it to a group or to a user. Now when the user logs into the device, it gets this policy, EPM agent gets installed. Now in the EPM policy, what I have said is default elevation response to deny all request, which means if the end user, who is a standard user, he wants to elevate and become an admin, EPM is going to deny all the request. Meaning, if I am the end user, I am the standard user in the device, I have enrolled the device. Now if I right click and run the VLC media player, or if I right click and run the Office Suite installer, Office click to run installer, since the EPM says denied all request, I will not be elevated to an admin. Okay, well, because I will not be elevated to a admin from a standard user. So this is what the default policy is going to do. So the elevation setting policy is going to do two things. First, it's going to install the EPM agent, create the EPM service, and it's going to make sure that the device is EPM ready. Okay. Second thing that this policy is going to do is it's going to deny all the requests. So when the end user, who is a standard user, tries to elevate himself to becoming a admin so that he can install a specific application, his request is denied for all the applications. Okay. Now once we have made the elevation setting, all of that is in place. Now the next thing that we can do is we can create something called elevation rule. Now in the elevation rule, what we are doing is we are whitelisting a specific application. What this means is, let's say that I make a EPM policy, and in this EPM policy, over here in the elevation rule policy, I select an application called VLC Media Player. And when I am making this VLC Media Player application, in the elevation type, I select user confirmed or automatic, which we are going to take a look over later. And over here, I select business justification or whatever I have to select. Now, what this is going to do is whatever I select over here. So there are two sections, right? One is the EPM elevation setting policy. I have selected the elevation setting policy. What this has done is, first it has installed the EPM agent. So installation of EPM. And what the second thing is going to do is deny all. Okay. So any user who tries to launch an application and tries to run it as an admin, his request will be denied. That is all that the elevation setting policy is doing. Now elevation rule policy, what we have to do is we have to whitelist a specific application. Now these two work in tandem. So it's going to be a combination of this and this, meaning EPM is now enabled. EPM is going to deny all the requests except this, meaning if I am the end user, if I try to launch any application as an admin, like for example Notepad++, or if I try to install Adobe or any application or Office click to run, for all those requests EPM is not going to elevate us to an admin, and since our session is not going to get elevated to an admin, we won't be able to install. However, whenever we try to launch VLC Media Player, then the story changes. Since we have whitelisted VLC Media Player, whenever the end user, who is a standard user, when he tries to launch the VLC Media Player and tries to run it, the session gets launched in admin context using an admin token, and the installation of VLC Media Player happens. Now, right now, why is this happening? Because we have created an elevation rule policy for VLC Media Player. If I want, I can create elevation rule policy for Notepad++ as well, and for Office click to run as well, and for some other application as well. Meaning, what does this mean? This means that in elevation rule policy, in a way, we can whitelist everything. Meaning, whichever applications are there in elevation rule policy, those applications, when launched by the end user, they are launched as admin. However, whenever any other application outside of the applications that are there in elevation rule policy, when they are launched by the end user, they are not launched as an admin. They are launched as a standard user. So when we do the demo, we will understand what exactly the end device behavior is. But this is what elevation setting and elevation rule is all about. Elevation setting is enabling EPM and setting up a default rule in the device. The default rule governs what is going to be the behavior when the standard user tries to run any application. Now, as I said, in elevation rule policy, what we are doing, we are whitelisting applications. So when the end user tries to launch any of these applications, only for that instance, the end user becomes an admin. So in the elevation rule policy, we are determining which is that application that we want to whitelist. Now, how do we determine that? I mean, how do we mention that it is going to be VLC media player only? If I say that any application with the name VLC media player.exe or whatever the name is, whenever that application is being run by the end user, the session should run as an admin. Well, that might be one way of doing it, but then let's say that I have another application named Notepad, and I as a user rename the Notepad application to VLC media player.exe. Now, how is the operating system going to know? Because the operating system is only supposed to elevate a session of VLC media player.exe to an admin session, right? Not notepad.exe. Now, I have renamed notepad.exe to VLC media player.exe, right? So if we just go with the name, then it is not foolproof, right? Therefore, there are additional parameters, and all these parameters serve only one purpose, and that is identifying the whitelisted application. So I can, as I said, file name was one option, but as we have just seen, file name is not foolproof. So with file name, we can put in file path as well. So let's say that any application with the name VLC media player.exe, which resides in C drive program files, VLC media player, inside of that VLC media player.exe. In that file path, if any application is running, then that application should be allowed to elevate to admin privileges. But then again, that is also not foolproof, because what if I rename any application to VLC media player.exe and place it in this location and then try to launch it? It can still launch as an admin, right? The operating system won't know the difference. Therefore, we have an option of using certificates. So what using certificate means is, what I'm going to do is, as an admin, when I'm making this policy, I am going to download the VLC media player, and whenever an application is developed by any organization, they sign that application, right, using a certificate. So I am going to use that certificate which has been used to sign this VLC media player and upload it over here. And so that is what the operating system is going to use to identify the correct application. It is not going to use the file name, because I can rename notepad.exe to VLC media player. It's not going to use the file path, because I can place the notepad.exe and rename it to VLC media player.exe, and I can place it to the same location where VLC media player is present, right? So then that would be a bypass. But what if I use the certificate that is actually used by the publisher to sign the VLC media player and upload the certificate over here? So what the operating system is going to do is, operating system is going to monitor all the processes and binaries in the running in the device, and whenever it sees that there is an application which is launched which has been signed by this certificate which is uploaded over here, the operating system, or in this case the EPM agent, knows that yes, this is a whitelisted application and this is the VLC media player, and in that case EPM agent elevates it to an admin. So I have an option of uploading the certificate file over here.
Okay, I also wanted to explain the difference between publisher and certificate authority that we have in the certificate types while we are making the policy. So if we want to allow files which are signed by a specific publisher or by a specific certificate, then we are going to use the publisher option. However, if I want that all the files which are signed by a chain, then we are going to select certificate authority. Like for example, let's say that I have an on-premise CA, and that on-premise CA is signing all the applications that I have, all the LOB applications, and I want to exempt all the all those LOB applications. Then I don't have to make a policy for each of those applications individually. I can just select over here the certification authority, and since that certification authority has signed all those applications, all those applications are going to have that certificate in its chain, and they all are going to be exempted. So this way we won't have to create different rules for each application. Usually not a good idea to trust the MS root CA. This is recommended only if you have an on-premise CA which is assigning the LOB applications. So publisher, when my file is signed by a particular certificate, then I'm going to use publisher and upload that certificate. If I have a issuing CA or a root CA which is signing all the LOB applications, then I'm going to use the certificate authority option.
Or I can upload the file hash as well. So whenever VLC media player is developed by the publisher, they sign the VLC media player application, and each application has a specific hash, right? This hash value cannot be changed by anybody, and this hash value is always unique, and I cannot come up with my application and ensure that my application's hash is same as any other application's hash, meaning hash of each application is unique. So what I can do is, the other way would be not using the name, not using the path, not using the certificate, but using the hash, meaning I as an admin download the VLC media player, I find out what is the hash of this application, and then I upload the hash over here. Hash is just an alphanumeric number, right? Now this hash is going to be used by the operating system to identify the right VLC media player instance. Whenever the EPM agent sees that there is an application whose hash is matching the hash which is present in the policy, it knows that yes, this is the application that is whitelisted. How is this going to help? This is going to help because even if I had a notepad.exe which I had renamed to VLC media player.exe, which I had placed in C drive program files VLC media player path, I cannot change the hash of the notepad.exe to the actual hash of VLC media player.exe which is uploaded over here, right? Neither can I change the certificate that is used to sign that application. So this is how the detection of an application works when we are setting up an elevation rule policy. Just a recap, the elevation rule policy is set just so that we can whitelist an application, so that these applications can run in admin context and all the applications outside of that continue to run in the standard user context. Now the whole concept of hash and certificate and all of that is coming because the operating system needs to identify that the application needs to identify the whitelisted application. As an admin can say I want VLC media player, notepad.exe, notepad++.exe and office to be whitelisted, but the operating system needs to make a right determination on which is the right VLC media player and which is the fake VLC media player which is not exactly VLC Media Player, but a malicious software which has been renamed to VLC Media Player and placed in the same location as VLC Media Player. So using the certificate and the hash comes to the rescue. Now there are some commands as well which we can use to export the certificate. So as I said over here, whenever a publisher is publishing releasing an application, it is signing that application using a certificate. So we can export that certificate and upload it over here, right? So that the operating system knows that, yeah, whenever an application which is signed by that same certificate as uploaded over here, it knows that yes, this is the right application, it can whitelist. So how do you get that certificate? Well, you can use this PowerShell command, or you can do that manually as well. So you can just right click on the, like in this case I have Notepad++ 8.5.3 version. You can just right click on it, go to the properties, go to digital signatures, click on detail, and then click on DigiCert time, and then click on details again, and then you have an option of clicking on copy to file. You just have to click on next, export it in the .cer format, next again, give it a file name, and then it will be exported. Once it is exported in that same location, you will be able to see your .cer file. Now you can use this .cer file and upload it over here in the portal. So this is the actual certificate that has signed the Notepad++.exe. So the actual certificate is imported into the portal. Now using this certificate, the EPM agent is going to know whether the application that is running in the device, whenever the end user who is a standard user, whenever he's trying to launch an application, EPM agent is going to match that whether the application's certificate which is running in the device, whether it is equal to the certificate which was uploaded to the portal by the admin over here. If these two certificates match, it means that this is the actual Notepad++.exe, right? And hence in that case the session is upgraded to admin. Otherwise the session continues to being a standard user, and a standard user cannot do an installation, therefore the installation fails. Hence, using this methodology, we can make sure that only whitelisted applications are actually getting installed in the device, and any application which is not whitelisted or any harmful or viruses, malwares, trojans, the installation of all of that fails, because for those installations the end user will not be elevated to an admin, and if he is not elevated to an admin, he won't be able to install them.
Okay, so now we are going to understand the end device behavior. So this is a device in which endpoint privilege management has been set up. And right now, if I right click on Notepad++ in a Windows 11 machine, I see an option which says that run with elevated access. Now, if I click on run with elevated access, and assuming that Notepad++ is one of the applications which is whitelisted by the policy, then I get a prompt, and this prompt asks for business justification, because that is how I have set up the policy, requiring a business justification. If I had set it to automatic, then it would have been automatically launched for during the installation, or had it been MFA, it would have asked us for the MFA. And after we enter the business justification, installation for Notepad++ begins. So these are the end user visuals. Right now we are doing Notepad++ and we are trying to install this application. But it can also be an application which is already installed, but we are just launching it to use it. Like for example, Procmon or Command Prompt or PowerShell. But the logic behavior remains the same. We just have to right click and run as an administrator, or instead of running as an administrator, we have to click on run with elevated access. Now we need to understand the difference between run as administrator and run with elevated access. So in our scenario, the end user is not an administrator. So if he right clicks and runs as an administrator, he will be given an UAC prompt wherein he'll have to enter the admin username and password, which obviously he does not have because he is not an admin. So for him to run this application as an admin, he will have to run this with elevated access, and his access will be elevated only if the policy permits it to. All right. So now, when I said that this prompt comes up whenever we have to enter a business justification, let's understand more on this point. And this is wherein the elevation types comes into the picture. So there are three kinds of elevation types, and these elevation types determine what is going to be the end behavior when the end user launches an application by clicking on run with elevated access, or let's say the operating system uh, is able to detect the same automatically. So we have three options: automatic, user confirmed, and support approved. If it is automatic, uh, then for us to make the scenario automatic, we have that option in the policy itself. So in the elevation conditions, when we are making a policy, which we are going to see in the demo as well, in the elevation type drop down, we have automatic or support approved or user confirmed. So we'll have to select automatic over here. So now let's understand what is going to be the end device behavior. If we have selected automatic over here, then this screen does not come up. So all that happens is the end user right clicks, clicks on runs with elevated access, and the operating system identifies that okay, he's trying to launch Notepad++. This Notepad++ is already a whitelisted application. Therefore, the application launches and this screen comes up, and wherein the application launches or the setup for the application launches as an admin. Since we have set it to automatic, the user does not have to enter anything. He does not have to enter any business justification, or there is no MFA or stuff like that. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now in the second one, we have user confirmed, wherein user has to confirm his activity that he wants to elevate. And this is exactly what you see when there is a user confirmed activity, that user is confirming by entering a business justification, right? And how do you set it up? You set it up in the policy itself. So when you are making the EPM policy, over there you have an option of either selecting business justification or Windows authentication or what have you. And the elevation type, we have selected user confirmed. So in automatic elevation, there is no friction at all. Everything happens automatically and there is no user intervention needed. However, in case of user confirmed, the user has to take some action, and only after he has taken the action, his access is elevated. So there is little friction in this. And the third one is support approved. In case of support approved, what happens is the end user right clicks and goes to run with elevated access. A request is generated which goes to the support, and only after support approves it, the end users becomes an admin for that specific applications session. So this is the case wherein a support person is needed to approve it, and this is most secure because the end user is able to perform admin related activity only after it has been vetted by the admin. However, this has most friction as well. All right, so now let's understand deployment strategy, that what exactly should our strategy be given that there are all these three options available, right? So the suggestion is, so there are two kinds of policies that we make for EPM, right? One is the elevation setting policy, which we have already seen. And in the elevation setting policy, we are enabling EPM. This is like a toggle. And the other one is elevation rule policy. So this is the setting policy and this is the rule policy. So in the rule policy, we provide information of the application. We provide the certificate on how the application is going to be uh, identified by the operating system and stuff like that. So one of the approaches that I would suggest is, in the elevation setting policy, selecting deny all, so that this becomes the blanket policy. We have already spoken about this approach. And in the elevation rule policy, we are manually whitelisting all the applications that we want. Now you can create multiple, you can add multiple applications over here as well by making multiple rules, or you can use a certificate, and if you provide a certificate which has signed multiple applications as well, then that one rule itself is going to whitelist multiple applications. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, one of the ways of doing the deployment and rolling out EPM would be denying all requests, so and then whitelisting selected apps, so that everything that comes under elevation rule policy, they are whitelisted depending upon the business justification that we want to give. Anything that comes that is outside of scope of the elevation rule policy, that any application that we have not identified here, in for all those, the elevation setting policy takes effect, and his request to elevate is denied, right? So this is how we can probably do a rollout. All right, so now let's understand the flow that happens at the background during the EPM agent installation. So by default in the operating system, when you would have seen, there is no EPM agent present, right? So what we are doing is we are making this policy, the EPM setting policy, and deploying it to the device. We are making this policy from the Intune portal. We can assign it to a device group or to a user group. Now we are going to understand what is it that happens at the background after this number one policy, which is the elevation setting policy, is deployed to the device. So I'm going to reference this diagram, which explains how exactly EPM agent is getting installed in the device. So the very first thing that happens is when we have made this policy and deployed it to the device health monitoring policy gets delivered to the device from Intune. Now, after the device health monitoring policy is deployed to the device from Intune, a scheduled task gets created. Now, we are going to see all of that in detail when we are at the demo, but think of, so if you guys have done enrollment of a Windows device to Intune using group policy, or I mean, maybe by co-management, then you would have seen that for the device to get enrolled to Intune, there is a scheduled task that gets created, and that scheduled task runs the device enroller.exe, and that exe enrolls the device to Intune. Now, with that as background, think of something similar happening. Now, what happens is, I know that the device is enrolled to Intune. Now, the device needs to get enrolled to something called MMPC, or Microsoft Management Provider Cloud Service. So the device gets enrolled. So the device has to get enrolled to MMPC, and for the device to do that, there is a scheduled task that gets created. Now we are going to take a look over that scheduled task in the demo. Now, once the scheduled task is created, the scheduled task runs, and it does its magic, which is reaching out to the relevant MMPC endpoints and trying to get the device enrolled to MMPC. Now, once the device gets enrolled to MMPC, the EPM agent is pushed down to the device from Intune. The EPM agent is pushed down, it is downloaded, it is installed. MSI exec tries to install the EPM agent, and once the MSI exec has done the installation of EPM agent, EPM service is created, and then we are all good. So this would be a high level flow of the different steps or the different stages that occur for the EPM agent to be installed in the device after we have deployed. And the EPM agent is going to be is going to be installed in the device when it's going to be installed in the device when we target a EPM settings policy to the device. So again, a high level overview of the agent installation flow. The device health monitoring device health monitoring policy is delivered to the device from Intune. A scheduled task is created. The scheduled task is responsible for enrolling the device to MMPC. The device reaches out to the relevant endpoints of MMPC and gets enrolled to MMPC. Once the device has got enrolled to MMPC, now the EPM agent installation has to be done. Now, for that to happen, the device downloads the EPM agent by referring to the relevant MSI. That MSI is downloaded, it is installed, and once it is installed, the EPM service is created, and then we are all good to go. So now we have two services, right? The Microsoft Intune service and the MMPC service. This is the device, and the device is talking to both the service. It's talking to Microsoft Intune as well via the OMIDM channel or the OMIDM client, which is present in the device. And it is also talking to and Microsoft Intune has its endpoints. and it is also talking to this another service called MMPC, which has its own endpoints. And the EPM agent is the one that talks with MMPC. Okay, so the device has got enrolled to MMPC, so this channel has been established. Now, given that this channel is established, the EPM agent in the device can use this channel and talk with MMPC. Okay, I'm not going to go into very details of MMPC or what this client is. We'll wait for that information to be there in our official public facing docs. But for now, this would be a high level overview. In one of the steps, I said that the EPM agent is downloaded by the CSP, right? So how do we substantiate this? So we are going to check all these steps one by one in the demo, and we are going to take a look over the screenshots as well. So how can we see whether the EPM agent is getting downloaded or not, and whether the device is receiving those policies or not? Well, if we take a look over the syncable trace over here, we can see that the requests that are happening, the sync that is happening, and the device is trying to download device is using the enterprise desktop app management CSP, and it is trying to download the EPM agent. All right. So until now, what we have understood is, if I have a device which is enrolled to Intune, and if I make a EPM setting policy and deploy it to the device, what is going to happen? We know that these 6 steps are going to be followed at a high level. And once these 6 steps are followed, device is enrolled to MMPC. After enrollment, the device has downloaded the EPM agent, and the EPM service is created, and the device is ready to receive policies related to EPM. Now let's see that if we have made a EPM policy. Now when I'm saying EPM policy, we need to understand which policy I'm talking about. So the first diagram that we saw, that diagram was for EPM settings policy. We have understood what EPM settings policy is doing. It is enabling or disabling. It's like a toggle, and because of the EPM policy, EPM is now enabled in the device. Okay, so the device is EPM enabled, but just enabling the EPM is not enough. Sorry, just enabling the EPM is not enough, right? Now we need to deploy some elevation rule as well, wherein we are going to whitelist an application. Now let's say that we have whitelisted an application by making a rule, which we just saw. Let's now understand the background flow of the delivery of a policy. Okay, a elevation rule policy. Okay, now for us to understand the background flow for elevation rule policy, I'm going to make use of this diagram. So on the left hand side, you can see that we have the Intune cloud service. On the right hand side, we have the device. Okay, in the previous diagram, we saw that the device was MMPC enrolled. How it was enrolled, we have already seen that. Now, given that the device is MMPC enrolled, now the device can receive all the policies from MMPC, right? So the policy that we have made for elevation rule in Intune via MMPC, it comes down to the device. And obviously there has to be a client in the device that acknowledges and accepts that policy, right? So just like an OMADM client, there is a client in the device, the WinDC client, and the WinDC client receives that policy from the device. Now, after the WinDC client receives the elevation rule policy, it identifies that the content of that policy needs to be written to a specific namespace. It writes that policy information to that namespace. Now, after it is written to the namespace, there are adapters. So there are many components in the operating system which have their own adapters. EPM also has its own adapter. This adapter is now going to handle the processing. So the EPM adapter, how did this adapter come from? This adapter came when EPM agent was getting installed in the device, right? In the previous diagram. So that is how this adapter is present in the device. It's not present in all the devices. It's only present when the first diagram is applicable on a device. And when is the first diagram applicable? It is applicable once you have made an elevation setting policy and deployed it to a device. So that is how EPM adapter came into existence. Now, what the EPM adapter is going to do, the EPM adapter is going to read and ingest the elevation rule policy, and it's going to write it down to the local storage of the device. Now, once it is written down to the local storage, the EPM client is now going to ingest the policy, and the rule is now going to become active. So whenever the end user is launching an application, or if the application gets detected automatically as well, the EPM client, the EPM service, and the rule management library, these three things work in tandem to make sure that only those applications are getting elevated which are whitelisted by the admin. So again, just a very high level overview. What is it that is happening under the hood for the EPM policy to take effect in the device? The policy is getting delivered from Intune. We are talking about the elevation rule policy here. Now, once it is deployed to Intune, the policy is delivered. Once it is made in the Intune portal, the policy is delivered via MMPC. The policy is delivered to the client, the WinDC client present in the device. Now, the WinDC client writes the policy to a specific namespace, and from that namespace, the EPM adapter reads it and writes it down to the storage of the device. Now, once the policy is written down in the storage, the policy is ingested by the EPM client. Once it is ingested, the EPM policy becomes active, and then it is read by the management library whenever the application is either launched by the end user, or it is automatically detected by the operating system. All right. So until now, we have seen two flows. The first flow was how EPM agent is getting installed in the device when we are making a elevation setting policy. The first flow was how a device is getting the EPM agent installed when an elevation setting policy is created. The second flow was how a device is getting an elevation rule policy when an elevation rule policy is deployed to the device. Okay, now let's the third. So these two are happening at the background. Now let's understand the flow that happens at the foreground, as in when the EPM agent is installed, the policy is received, right? These two things are going to happen at the background, and these two things are happen whenever the policy is created and assigned to the device. But the policy is not going to take effect all the time, right? The policy is only going to take effect, as in the policy is only going to do its magic when either of these two things happen. When either the end user clicks on run with elevated access, or the filter driver in the operating system automatically detects the binary. Which binary? The binary that we have whitelisted in our elevation rule policy. So either the end user is going to Notepad++, right clicking on it and clicking on run with elevated access. That is when EPM is going to come into the picture. Or if, let's say, I opened command prompt or some other application, and from there I try to launch Notepad++. So the and Notepad++ is whitelisted. So EPM is going to operating system is going to detect, and EPM is going to know that this policy, that according to the policy received, Notepad++ is a whitelisted application. So whether user consciously clicks on run with elevated access, or there is some other application which in turn is launching this application, in both the cases, the flow is going to be triggered. Now, once the flow for EPM is triggered, the filter driver checks the file name and the file path, and it makes sure that whatever is there in the policy matches with whatever actually is happening. Like for example, let's say that in my policy I've said that any application with the name np.exe which has the path C drive program files notepad and then np.exe inside of that. So I've provided the name and I've provided the path, right? So the filter driver is uh, now filter driver suddenly sees that there is notepad++ that is launched. So now the filter driver has to ensure that whatever information was there in the policy matches with whatever is actually happening. So for the actual process that is launched, it's going to make a note of the name of the application and the path, and it is going to match it with what was there in the policy. Now EPM service is going to do a lookup for all the rules. It's going to do a match, it's going to do a lookup. So either it's going to pass or it is going to fail. Like for example, let's say that the name of the application that I have launched is notepad++.exe, and I have provided a path or I have provided a hash rule in the policy. It matches with what is happening in the device. Then EPM is going to proceed, and the next step obviously is depending upon whether the elevation is going to be automatic. If it's going to be automatic, then this part is skipped. If it was manual, then user is prompted with the consent UI wherein he has to perform a business justification, and then EPM launches the application. However, let's say that the name of my application is not notepad++.exe and the path is not that, but the name of my application is vlcmediaplayer.exe. So vlcmediaplayer.exe is not a whitelisted application as per my policy. So in this case, there are two things that is going to happen. Either the end user, either the session is launched as a standard user or he gets an error. So what's the goal here? Let's take a step back. What's the goal of EPM here? The goal of EPM is making sure that the end user becomes an admin when he is launching a specific application only. And that specific application for us is Notepad++, because we have whitelisted it as per our policy. But in my example, what we are launching is VLC Media Player. So VLC Media Player is not whitelisted. So the end user should not be able to launch VLC Media Player as a admin. So what is going to happen? So there are two things that can happen as an outcome. Either the end user's session for that application gets launched as a standard user because he cannot elevate himself to an admin because that is not whitelisted by the admin, or it gives an error saying that elevation cannot be done. Which one happens in which case? Well, if you just double click on an application, then it's going to launch as a standard user if your application was not whitelisted. But if you right click and run with elevated access and that application is not getting elevated for you because it was not whitelisted, then you get an elevation cannot be done error. Okay, so again, a summary of what we saw in the diagram. The first thing that is happening is detection. The operating system has to detect whether a whitelisted application is running or whether a unwhitelisted application, if that's the right word, is running. So the user can either click on run as and the binary is detected, or the filter driver detects it automatically because the user has not voluntarily clicked on an application and run it, but some other application has made a call. Now the filter driver is going to check the file name and the path. Now the EPM service is going to look up to see if there are any rule that exists for the application that the end user has launched. If it is able to find a rule, then the consent UI comes up if the end user has to enter a justification or MFA or stuff like that. If it's not able to find any rule, then EPM is going to bail by two options. Either it's going to launch it as a standard user, or it's going to give an error saying that this elevation cannot happen. Okay, and then there is a virtual account, that is virtual admin account or a system account, that is used to do the elevation on behalf of the user. The virtual account is an admin account. All right, now we are going to take a look over the working directory and the logs for endpoint privilege management. So the working directory is C drive, program files, Microsoft EPM agent. And inside of this, we will see a lot of folders. All these are important folders as far as our processing of EPM is concerned. Now you see that there is a folder called logs. It contains all the logs. Now there is a folder called EPM driver, which contains the driver. There is a EPM adapter, which we have already seen. There is a EPM client, which we have already seen. There is a EPM consent UI, the UI that the end user sees when he has to enter a justification or the MFA. There is the EPM service, there are the EPM tools, right? So all these folders are present inside the Microsoft EPM master folder. And if we go inside, so we are going to talk all of these in detail, but the first thing that I want to talk about is the logs. So if I go inside the logs folder, then we see that there are so many logs present, right? You can see that there is this EPM log, there is the EPM service log, there is the EPM stub log, etc. So these are the relevant logs that we have to look into as far as EPM is concerned. One is obviously the MDM logs, which is the device management enterprise diagnostic provider, where we already know that we are going to look at this logs for anything related to enrollment as well. And then the EPM specific logs, which are inside this folder, which being the EPM log, consent UI log, EPM service log, and the service stub log. Out of all these logs, if I were to highlight the most two important ones, they would be the EPM log and the EPM service log. The EPM service log has a lot of critical functions. The EPM service, whatever the EPM service is doing, the EPM service log logs all of that. And EPM service is doing a lot, right? It is orchestrating the elevation flow. It is showing whether the policy is received or not. It is responsible for telemetry. It is responsible for all the elevation that happens in the device, right? So the EPM service log shows like how many policies were found for a specific user, whether a rule was found or not, whether EPM consent UI is launched or not, whether justification is received or not. It shows whatever is happening with the tokens, and it shows whether the process is ultimately launched in admin context for the end user or not, right? So EPM service log, very essential. And the other log being the EPM log. The EPM log also shows whether the end user is right clicking and running it as an administrator or running it with elevated access, or how exactly the application was detected, and then all the processing that is happening after that. So EPM log and EPM service log, all of that very essential. So now this is just a snippet for the consent UI log, and over here on the left hand side you see that the end user tried to launch an application as an admin, which was probably not whitelisted. And since it was not whitelisted in the elevation rule policy, he gets a prompt saying that your organization doesn't allow to run this app as an administrator, contact your support. And when we check the EPM consent UI log, we see the same thing, which says that showing error message to the user, and this is the error message. Okay. Now this is the consent UI snippet from the consent UI log, but as I said, the EPM log and the EPM service log are the most important ones. And in the EPM service log, we can see a lot of processing, right? We can see that which application is being launched by the user. So over here you see that inside C drive temp I had kept an application for VLC media player. So you see that it tries to launch that application, and if I just try to launch it in a device wherein VLC media player is not whitelisted, then it gives me this error because I'm not authorized to run the VLC media player in this case as admin because it's not whitelisted. However, if I run any other application, let's say that in the same location in C drive temp, I had kept the syncml viewer. So if I try to run the same application as a syncml viewer, over here you see that a lot of processing is happening, and it is going to validate a lot of things. So again, a different log for a different policy. So in this case, in this machine, what I had done was I had I had whitelisted the Notepad++ and the syncml viewer application. So it says that loaded one policy, the file name is Notepad++. This is the SID of the user, and this is the file hash over here, and there is a rule ID over here. It is doing a rule lookup. It's saying that this is self elevation. It is launching the EPM consent UI. So you can see all the processing that is happening at the back end. You can see the file hash over here as well. And in the logs, you can see a lot of file hashes. Now, if you would have seen, I was showing the working when I was showing the working directory, I said that there is a EPM client, there is a consent UI exe, there is a driver exe, and there are all DLLs as well, right? And all these DLLs are going to be used. So before any client is launched, what EPM does is it does a file hash verification. So over here you can see in the log, I can see it's doing a verify file hash, and the file hash is this, it's B8. This file hash is not of the application that we are trying to launch, which in this case is Notepad++. If we find out the file hash, we'll see that this file hash is for the application EPM consent UI.exe. So the EPM consent UI is going to be launched. The consent UI is wherein the end user enters the justification or stuff like that. And before that is launched, EPM is making sure that the hash of this application is correct. So it's just making sure that it's not launching some other application. And then you can see that there is one more hash that we can see over here, which is starting with F4 and 70. Over here, you can see that there is one hash starting with 70, ending with 96. And this hash happens to be of the EPM service stub.exe. The point that I'm trying to make is everything that the EPM service and the EPM client is doing, it's all getting logged in the EPM.log or EPM service.log. And everything that EPM is launching, may that be any exe, may that be the EPM service exe, EPM service stub.exe, consent UI exe, it's checking the hash of all those files as well, just to make sure that it launches the right thing. And then we have already seen this working directory inside C drive program files, Microsoft EPM agent policy elevation rules. There are these DAT files that are created, and these DAT files contain a lot of information. It contains the name of the application which we were trying, for which the policy has been made, which is notepad++.exe. It shows the hash of the, this is in accordance with the policy, the elevation rule policy that was created at the portal. It shows the setting ID, the tenant ID, the rule ID, and all. Okay, so now let's take a look over the registry. So if you have to take a look over the registry, there are four important registries that we have to keep in mind. And before we take a look over all those four important registries, another thing that I wanted to call out, which is important, is the task scheduler library. So the scheduled task, as we have seen, is important because the end device is going to get enrolled to MMPC, and for that to happen, a scheduled task gets created, which runs the device enroller.exe, and the device reaches out to the MMPC endpoints. So this is a device wherein the EPM setting policy was not targeted. And if the EPM setting policy was not targeted in the scheduled task, there is just this one schedule, okay, which was used for enrolling the device to Intune. Now, after the device was targeted by the EPM policy, you see that there are two scheduled tasks that are created. Earlier there was just one, now there are two. So it's important to make sure that the scheduled task is getting created correctly. Okay, so now we are going to take a look over the registry, and the first one that we are going to take a look over is HKLM software Microsoft enrollments.
So this is the first screenshot, and this is from a device which is only enrolled to Intune, and nothing related to EPM or MMPC has happened in this device yet. So over here you see that under HKLM software Microsoft enrollments, there are a lot of GUIDs, and the only one which has any information in it is this one. And if you click on this GUID, then you can see over here it contains a lot of information like AAD resource ID, which is one of the Intune endpoints, which is managed.microsoft.com, and it contains the UPN of the user as well as the thumbprint of the certificate, which is issued by Intune when a device is enrolled to Intune. This is just plain simple Intune enrollment, nothing fancy. Now after the device is enrolled to Intune, you see that inside the base node, the node that was created when the device was enrolled to Intune, there is one more key that gets created called linked enrollment. Now when you go inside linked enrollment, it has a linked enrollment ID. And what is the ID of linked enrollment? It is CAAC51. And what is this? It is another ID over here. So initially only one ID, only one GUID got created under enrollments, and this got created when the device was enrolled to Intune. Now when the device got the EPM agent policy, the device got enrolled to MMPC, then two things happened. First, an entry over here got created for linked enrollment, and this linked enrollment has a linked enrollment ID. This is the first thing that happened. And the second thing is, with this linked enrollment ID over here, a GUID was also created. And this is the enrollment GUID for MMPC. So just like when the device gets enrolled to Intune, there is a GUID created signifying the enrollment to the service. Similarly, when the device got enrolled to MMPC, a GUID was created signifying Intune's signifying device's enrollment to MMPC. And this enrollment GUID is linked to this one, and that is what this key is signifying. Now, if we go deeper, the first GUID that was created, which was created when device was enrolled to Intune, the AAD resource ID for that is manage.microsoft.com. However, the second GUID that got created when the device was enrolled to MMPC, the AAD resource ID for that is checkin.dm.microsoft.com. And if you guys remember, when we saw the prerequisite for enrolling a device to MMPC, this endpoint was one of the requirement. So this is a different endpoint, which is what we have documented as well, and that is what we see in the AAD resource ID. Now the other location registry that we need to check is HKLM Software Microsoft Enterprise Desktop App Management, and inside of that we have a node called MSI. So before the device was enrolled to MMPC, when the device was just Intune enrolled, you see that there was just one entry for MSI. Now after the device got enrolled to MMPC, you see that there was a MSI that the device downloaded, and the entry for that got logged in the registry as well. And here you see the other entry. So this is a device which got targeted by the EPM policy and downloaded the EPM agent. So over here inside this GUID, you see that there is this current download URL, and this download URL has a link for the EPM agent MSI. Now if we were to copy this link, go to a browser, paste it, we will be able to download the EPM agent MSI from the browser manually as well, which we are going to see in the demo. So until now what we have substantiated is, by looking at this registry, we can be rest assured that the EPM agent was downloaded as an MSI by the device when it got the EPM policy, hence this entry got created, which was not present before. And the second thing was the device got enrolled to MMPC, and since it got enrolled, the enrollment GUID was also created, and this GUID is linked with the normal enrollment GUID of Intune. Hence there is a entry for linked enrollment as well, which has the same ID as the ID of the second GUID. Now the next registry that we need to check is HKLM Software Microsoft Declared Configuration Host OS Config Enrollments, and inside enrollments there will be the enrollment GUID and there will be the SID, and then there are these key values. Now if we double click on the key value and if we copy whatever is there inside this key value into a notepad, we are going to get all the information that was there in the policy. Like for example, in this case there was a EPM rule policy created for Notepad++ using file hash. That is the information that was there in the policy. The policy came down to the device, it got written in the registry, and now if we look at this, we see that the file name is Notepad++. The action is EPM elevation rule over here. You can see that the action is EPM elevation rule. The hash is over here. This is the hash that was provided in the policy in the portal when I was making the policy. So what this signifies is the policy that was there in the portal has come down to the device, and whatever we are seeing over here in the registry inside key value is in accordance with the policy that was created at the portal. This is again one of the other things that we might want to check when we are doing any troubleshooting for EPM policy delivery. Now the last registry, which is also very important, is HKLM Software Microsoft EPM agent. Now before the device got targeted by the EPM policy, there was no node called EPM agent, but after it got targeted, now you see that there is a node called EPM agent that got created, and when you go inside this node, there are many other sub nodes like policy, rule, lookup, and then let's say that I have whitelisted 3 applications: Notepad++, VLC Media Player, and 7-Zip. Then there will be a node for each of these applications. In my case, I whitelisted all these applications: 7-Zip, Chrome, Notepad++, Procmon, and VLC. Therefore, you are seeing entries for each of this. But presence of node over here for each application shows that which application are whitelisted as per the policy as viewed in the device. Now, if you are seeing any application which when we are trying to launch, it's not getting launched, even though the admin has whitelisted it, This is also one of the places where we need to check, so to make sure that whether the application actually got whitelisted or not when viewed from the device end. Now the next thing to check is the MDM diag logs. Now after the device is enrolled to MMPC, you will be able to see an entry for that in the MDM diag logs also. So over here you see that the device is MMPC enrolled, and you see the MMPC GUID over here. So just like when the device is Intune enrolled, you see the Intune GUID. Similarly, as the device is MMPC enrolled, you see the MMPC GUID over here. This further substantiates that the device was MMPC enrolled. And we are also going to see a event via log as well. So just like when the device gets enrolled to Intune, you see an event via log under a device management enterprise diagnostic provider. Similarly, there is going to be an entry in the event via logs as well when the device gets enrolled to MMPC. And then the last thing that we need to check as far as the activation of EPM in the device is concerned is the services. So in this device, you see that there is no service for Microsoft EPM agent as EPM policy is not delivered. But after the policy is delivered, you see that there is a service created in the device called Microsoft EPM agent. And this agent's path to executable is inside the EPM service folder, and it's running the EPM service.exe. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is if the standard user is trying to open services.msc, he will not be able to see this service running. In order to see this service running, we will have to launch the services.msc in admin context, and only then we'll be able to see the presence of this service.
Okay, now let's take a look over the troubleshooting flow that we should follow while we are troubleshooting any issue related to EPM. And this troubleshooting flow is in accordance with the first two diagrams that we have seen. So these are the 6 steps that I have categorized our troubleshooting into. The first step involves the admin checking everything from the portal end. So let's say that I as an admin want that the end user who is a standard user should be able to run Procmon as an admin in his device. For that to happen, I would have to make an EPM setting policy and an EPM rule policy. And in the EPM rule policy, I'll have to whitelist Procmon. Now, for me to whitelist Procmon, I would either have to upload the cert that is used for signing Procmon, or I would have to upload the hash of the file. So I have to make sure as an admin that both those values are correct. I have to make sure that the policy body is correct. I have to make sure that the assignment of the EPM setting policy as well as the EPM rule policy is correct. So the step 1 involves the admin checking everything from his end, from the portal, for which there is no dependency on the end user and for which the end user does not need to provide any logs. Once the admin has checked everything, then the step 2 involves checking the specific device, if it is a device specific or a user specific issue. Because even if the policy is made successfully and correctly, and even if it is deployed correctly, it is still not going to work if the device does not meet the prerequisite for EPM. And we know that there is a prerequisite for the device to meet, and that is there needs to be a specific KB installed in the device. The device needs to have a specific patch level. We have already seen what that patch level is for Windows 11, and the end user needs to be licensed. So these are the 2 things from a prerequisite standpoint that we must check while we are troubleshooting any issue for EPM. Now the third thing is, if step 1 has been checked, step 2 has been checked, then our expectation is that the device should get the policy and at least things should start. So now the third thing that we are going to check, or maybe the first thing in the device, is whether the MMPC enrollment of the device is happening or not. So for this, we can check whether the scheduled task is getting created or not. For this, we can check in the enterprise diagnostic provider log whether the enrollment to MMPC is happening successfully or not, right? If the enrollment is happening fine, then we can be rest assured that we can move to the next step. We can also check the enrollment grid in the registry under enrollments to make sure whether the enrollment had happened successfully to MMPC or not. If it has happened, then the step 4 involves seeing whether the EPM agent is getting successfully installed or not. We can check that by going into the MSI registry and seeing whether the EPM agent was downloaded. Then we can see whether the EPM agent was installed or not. And if EPM agent was installed, then we can see the folder structure, whether C drive program files, EPM Microsoft EPM agent folder got created or not. And if it got created, then whether the Microsoft EPM service got created or not. So these are the things that we would check to, because these, if only these things have happened, then the policy processing will happen. So step 4 will involve checking all these things in the device. Now, if that is the case, then in step 5, we should be able to see the policy related registry as well. All the registry wherein the EPM rules are populated, which we have already seen under key values. So we have to make sure that all those registries, like this one under EPM agent and this one under declared configuration host OS, are created and populated with the right values in accordance with the policy. And if that has happened, then the step 6 would be taking a look over the logs. So we have already seen the logs. These are the list of logs that we spoke about. We can check the EPM log, the EPM service log, the consent UI log, and the service stub log to find out what exactly is happening and why exactly the application is not getting launched in the admin context, assuming that everything in the previous 5 steps were correct. So that's pretty much it. I mean, from troubleshooting standpoint, it all comes down to narrowing down and going through with the rule of elimination. So we just have to eliminate all the variables one by one, and then we can probably reach to a conclusion. But this would be the holistic approach that I would suggest as far as troubleshooting a EPM issue is concerned.
Okay, now let's take a look over some good to have features that are not there in EPM as of now, but it would be good if Microsoft releases it down the line. First is control over the behavior of child process. Like for example, right now, let's say that command prompt is exempted or whitelisted. Now the end user is able to run command prompt as an admin. If he can run command prompt as an admin, then he can virtually run anything from command prompt as an admin as well. Like for example, let's say that I have opened command prompt as an admin, and from command prompt I open procmon.exe, right? Then that procmon instance is also going to be launched as an admin, which means the child process, the parent process being command prompt.exe or PowerShell.exe, which let's say is whitelisted, but the child process which the parent process is creating, we don't have any control over that. So it would be good to have any control over the behavior of child process. Having MFA as a justification, as of now, we have the ability of entering justification, text or message, but we don't have the ability of entering a MFA. So if any phone MFA or text MFA is set up in place, then that would also be an additional security. Having support approved functionality, now this is coming soon, wherein the support is going to approve and only after that the end user is going to be elevated. Having APIs for automation, so let's say that the customer wants to do some automation and he wants the supports to be, he wants the elevation request to be automatically approved for a bunch of application, and for another bunch of application he wants some email to be triggered or stuff like that. Then he can make use of the APIs if they are exposed, and then integration with some ticketing tools like ServiceNow or Remedy or stuff like that. Okay, now let's talk about reporting and insights. So EPM also provides us very good reporting as far as the elevation done by the user is concerned. So from Intune portal, we can take a look over the elevations that have happened, the history of elevations over time, and the reporting also makes it easy for us to create new elevation rules and enables easy migration to standard user. So this is a screenshot from my tenant wherein I can see the name of the user, the name of the device, the file that the end user tried to elevate to, as well as whether the result was completed or not, as well as the timestamp. So it provides a very good information. We can filter on this report as well using columns and stuff like that. But this provides us a ability for the administrator to go to the portal and see how many elevation has happened across the organization, which user has elevated for the most amount of time by putting in filters, which application has been elevated for the most amount of time by putting in filters in the file name and stuff like that. All right, now let's discuss some key pointers, some good to know stuff, and Okay, now let's discuss some key pointers. The first thing we need to keep in mind for co-managed devices is that EPM supports co-managed devices even without moving any workload. So if you have a device wherein all the workloads are set to SECM or config manager and not Intune, still EPM policy can be delivered from Intune. So we don't have to move any specific workload. Also, we need to keep in mind that EPM does not get involved if the logged in user is an admin, because EPM doesn't need to get involved in that case. EPM is a technology that we are using so that the end user who is a standard user can launch an application or install an application in the admin context, right? So if the end user who is logged into the device is already an admin, there is no need for EPM to get involved. When we are setting up the policy in the file path, we can use environment variables as well. And if we need to uninstall EPM client, we need to explicitly disable it from the policy. So we have made a EPM setting policy wherein there was a toggle. If we turn that toggle to on and if we deploy that policy to a device, then the EPM agent gets installed and the device becomes active for EPM. Now, if we unassign that policy, that is not going to uninstall the EPM agent. For the EPM agent to be uninstalled, the admin will consciously have to deploy a policy wherein he is going to put that toggle to off. Only then the EPM agent is going to be uninstalled. The EPM client is going to be uninstalled from the device. Now, EPM is not going to make any determination on whether the app is safe to run or not as an admin. Now, we as an admin are making a determination on which application should be whitelisted, which should not be whitelisted. Now, tomorrow if I whitelist a malware from the portal, then EPM is not going to make any determination and stop the user from launching that malware as an admin, because I as an admin have approved it. I as an admin have whitelisted it. So EPM is not used to safeguard the end user from accidentally launching an application as an admin which the tenant admin has already whitelisted, right? So EPM is not going to make any determination which app is safe to run and which app is not safe to run. And we have to keep in mind that EPM is an elevation control technology and not an app control technology. So EPM is not going to block the running of an application. EPM is going to stop the launching of an application in the admin context. If EPM is not allowing the end user to launch an application in the admin context, the application can always be launched as a standard user, right? But EPM is not going to stop the end user in launching an application in the standard user context. Hence, it's an elevation control technology and not an app control technology. Now, there is no BYOD support for EPM, and that is because in BYOD, the end user is always going to be an admin, right? It's not a corporate joined machine. It's a personal owned machine. And in the personal owned machine, there is always going to be an admin, right? Who has joined the machine to the Azure AD, who has enrolled the machine to begin with, right? So there is no BYOD support for EPM, and anything that is running under system context is unaffected because system has always elevated privileges in the device. So EPM is only going to come into the picture for anything that is being run by the user, and if the user is not an admin. It's not going to govern whether a specific, if a specific application earlier was running as an admin using the system account, then later on also, when I say later on, what I mean is after the application of EPM policy also, the device is going to continue running the same way. Okay. And as I said, if we log into a machine as an admin, EPM is not going to involve because the user is an admin and he already has an admin token. Okay, now let's take a look over using EPM tools. So now there is a built-in EPM agent, and that EPM agent has a PowerShell commandlet which helps us diagnose a lot of problem. It shows us the elevation rules that are received, the client policies that are received, and a lot more information. So these are the steps that we need to follow. We first need to open a PowerShell as an admin. Now this is something that the admin will do for troubleshooting. Now let's say that I am the admin. The end user was not able to launch or install the Office Click to Run application, even though Office Click to Run was whitelisted. The end user is not an admin. Now I, who am the admin, who am the administrator, I have to do some troubleshooting. Now this is one of the troubleshooting that I can do. I have to launch the PowerShell in the device as an admin, and then I have to go to program files, Microsoft EPM agent, the directory, and under that I have to go to EPM tools, and then the first thing I have to do is I have to import this module. Once I've imported this module, then I can use commands like get policy, and the policy type can be elevation rule or client settings, which is going to tell us whether the this is actually telling you what you could have found out from the registry as well, but this is better to look at. So if you run this command, then it is telling you whether enable EPM is true or false, and if it is true, then what are the policies that it has received. Like for example, over here if I do client settings, it tells us enable EPM is equal to true, and what is the default setting in the EPM setting policy. Over here it shows us the default behavior as well. And if I do a get policies and if the policy type is elevation rules, then it tells me the elevation rule policy that has been targeted to this device. Like in this case, I have targeted a elevation rule policy for Procmon, for Notepad++, for Chrome, for VLC Media Player, and for 7-Zip. And it tells me all the exe files that were targeted, the policy ID, the version, and all those information, right? So again, a very handy tool if you want to intuitively take a look over the policy that the device has received from the Intune service without going through the hassle of going through the logs or going through the registry. You can make use of this EPM tool. All right, enough said. Now let's get to the fun part, and now let's do some demo.
Alright, so for the demo, I am logged into my machine. This is my Hyper-V, and I am going to launch my machine. Let me just very quickly open up the command prompt and then do a host name. The name of this machine is EPM demo. So I'm going to run WinVer, and I see that my machine is running with Windows 11 22H2. The build version is 226211848. Now let me quickly bring up our official documentation, and over here it says that Windows 11 version 22H2, this is the KB that we have to refer to. So I'm just going to click on this hyperlink, and then over here you will see that there are a lot of revisions that have happened. So my device is running with Windows 11 22H2 226211848. This is my device. So I am going to click on it, and it's going to tell me the KB that is applicable. So I'm just going to copy this KB number and then just go to catalog.update.microsoft.com and then just run a search for this KB number. Then I am going to download the KB from here. I have the option of downloading this for x64 as well as for ARM based devices. I'm just going to copy this to my device. And once I have copied it to my device, over here I've just downloaded it. This is the device. And when I install this KB, I've already installed it. Therefore, it says that it is already installed. So just making sure that the prerequisite is met from the device end and the KB that needs to be installed is installed. That's one. The second is the endpoint. So there are some other endpoints that needs to be whitelisted for EPM. The first one being at star.dm.microsoft.com, and anything. So make sure that you're using this wildcard because it's going to be a long list starting with ending with dm.microsoft.com. So you have to use that, and SSL inspection is not supported. So you have to make sure that SSL inspection is turned off. So if the endpoints are good from connectivity standpoint, and if the KB is installed, then from a prerequisite standpoint, everything is good. then we are good to go. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to enroll this device to Intune. Now, before I do that, let me just do some housekeeping. I'm just going to go to the registry edit and then just go to KLM software, Microsoft enrollments. Right now the device is not enrolled, so I don't need all these registry entries. So I'm just going to delete this just so that later on when you see, so these two are just entries that are stale entries that are lying, and there are no other entries, so that later on when entries get created, it is easier for us to identify and so that we don't get lost. And there is no folder structure right now under C drive program files. There is no Microsoft EPM agent present. Okay, all good. Now we are going to go to the portal and we are going to first create a user, assign license to that user, and then we are going to use that user. Okay. Okay, so I've just created a user named Nugget. And if I go into the licensing, currently this user does not have any license assigned. So I'm just going to assign the EMS E5 license to him. And EMS E5 is going to have all this. This is all I need to get the device enrolled by this user to Intune. But just getting the device enrolled is not sufficient. The user needs to have a EPM license as well. So I've just selected the add-on. Now we have already spoken in the theoretical section the different kind of EPM licenses that are available as a part of bundle or standalone. You can have any of that. So the licensing part is now done. Currently, there are no policies for EPM created for this user. So we are going to get to that later. But first, let's enroll this device to Intune and start so that we are able to see this device in the portal. So I'm back at the device, the usual drill of enrollment. I will do a Azure AD join and Intune enrollment. Okay, so all set, the device is Azure AD joined and Intune enrolled. Okay, so the name is updated. The compliance of the device is also going to be evaluated very shortly. So looks good. The device is enrolled. Let me quickly switch back to the device and let's open up the registry editor once again. So now you see that there are few more entries. So let me just go to view and do a refresh. Now under enrollments, you see there is this entry which contains enrollment related information. The other entries are not relevant and we can pretty much ignore them for now. So if I expand my parent key over here, you see that these are the entries. I want to show it to them now because after EPM comes down to this device, a lot is going to change over here. So the device was enrolled by Nugget at everythingaboutinTune.com. There is the certificate thumbprint is there. It shows us the resource ID as well, which is managed.microsoft.com, right? So everything looks good. And we have the device enroller node. We have the DM client node. If I expand that, we have this node which contains the enterprise device name, and that's pretty much it. Okay. All right, we are good. Now let's switch back to the portal. So this is all that has to be done at the device end. Like we saw in this slide, right? The device prerequisite is met, the KB is installed as per the Windows version, and the device is enrolled to Intune. From the portal end, EPM license is assigned, but EPM policy creation and all of that are yet to happen. So let me come back quickly to the portal and start making policies for it. So I am going to go to endpoint security. Now the place where EPM resides in the portal might change later on, but this is where it is as of now. So if I go to endpoint privilege management, I have the option of creating policies over here. There might be some residual policies. We are going to ignore all of that because they are not right now assigned. And as we have already spoken about, there are two kind of policies that can be created for Windows 10. That's the only option we have, Windows 10 and later. We have the option of creating an elevation rule policy and an elevation setting policy. We already know the difference. This is toggle on or off, and this is for whitelisting specific application. So first I'm going to go to elevation setting policy, and I'm going to go to create. Now, this is the important one. EPM needs to be turned on or enabled. I'm fine sending the elevation data to Microsoft. Reporting scope is fine. Default elevation response, I am going to do a deny all request. So we have already spoken about how we should target or aim deployment of EPM policies. I'm just going to click on next, next, and create. Now I'm going to quickly create a group for this user so that the policy can be assigned. So I'm going to call it EPM deployment group, and the member is going to be Nugget. Okay, the group is ready. I can go back to the policy and assign it to the group. So this is my policy, EI demo elevation setting policy. It is currently not assigned. I have the option of going to assignments. You can use scope tags as well if you need. So I'm just going to click on add groups, and I'm going to assign this to EPM deployment group. The deployment is done. Now I just have to wait for a couple of minutes. I'm going to go to the device and run a couple of sync so that the EPM policy comes down to the device from the Intune portal. At this point, if I were to run a sync ML viewer, I would be able to see the policy coming down to the device. Okay, so I just finished running a quick reboot. Sometimes reboot just helps and fasten things up. So now I'm back into the device. Let's go and see C drive, program files, and yeah, there you go. Microsoft EPM agent is now there, and it has the correct folder structure as well. Right now, if I go into logs, it will have the default logs as well, the EPM log, the EPM consent UI logs, and the service logs. Nothing much to see in the logs right now. If I go into policies, there won't be anything inside elevation rule policy because I haven't deployed any elevation rule policy. I've only deployed a client setting policy. So that is there. If I double click and open this in Notepad, let's see. This has the setting ID, the AAD tenant ID, and over here the important part, the toggle EPM enable EPM is set to true. This shows that the device got the policy and the policy is telling the device to turn on the EPM bit. Okay, so far so good. The folder structure is there and the policy has come down. Okay, now let's take a look over the registry. So I'm going to go to HKLM software Microsoft and then the same enrollments registry. And over here, initially we saw only one entry. Now there should, which was this one. Now there should be one more which is populated, and there you go. This is the one that is populated. You can ignore the rest because rest are not going to, as you can see, the rest are pretty much blank. So the one that is relevant is the first one, which happened when we enrolled the device to Intune, which is for manage.microsoft.com. And the second one, now let me expand this and show you what has changed. So initially when we expanded this key, the linked enrollment key was not there, but now we see that there is another key named linked enrollment that is created. And inside linked enrollment, we see that this is pointing towards an ID that is 487D. And what is this ID? If you look below over here, you can see the same ID that is 487D. And this got created because the device got enrolled to MMPC. Okay, so this ID is linked with this ID. That's why under linked enrollment, you can see the second ID present. Now in the second, let's see the details of the second ID. For this, you see that the endpoint is checkin.dm.microsoft.com. This is one of the endpoints to which the device needs to contact while enrolling to MMPC. We saw that this was one of the requirements in the prerequisites in the network endpoints as well, right? And then rest, other than that, you'll be able to see a couple of certificates and everything else is cool. All right, so this also looks good. This shows that the enrollment did happen. Now, if you wanted to further substantiate that, then you can go to the task scheduler, and we are going to go to the task scheduler library, Microsoft, Windows, and then enterprise management. Now over here, you can see that there are two keys created. Earlier, we did not see, I mean, before the device was enrolled. So this key was created to make the device enrolled to MMPC because it is running the scheduled task for device enroller.exe. Okay, now one other thing that I wanted to show you guys was the computer management. So right now I am logged into this device as Nugget. This is the name of the user. It's an Azure AD user, right? And the device is Azure AD joined. However, if I check the local administrators in this group, that user is not an admin, meaning the user account who is logged into the device is a standard user and not an admin user. Okay, hence the use case of EPM. So right now, if this standard user who is logged into this machine, if he tries to install anything, so if I go to this PC, if I go to temp, I have a few setup files here. Let's say that I want to install Notepad++. So I double click on this. It tells me to enter the admin username and password because I'm not an admin. And since I'm a standard user and I'm not an admin, I won't have this. Meaning I won't be able to install Notepad++ or any application. If I try to install VLC Media Player, the same thing happens. I have to enter the admin username and password, which I don't have. Now, once we make the EPM policy, we are going to see that how EPM is going to come to rescue. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you guys was the services. But there is one thing that we need to keep in mind. So as EPM is installed now, we should be able to see the service for EPM present in this device. So if I go to Microsoft and then if I look for the service Microsoft EPM agent, I don't see any service, even though EPM agent is installed. Why is that? Because right now I have not opened services.msc as an admin. So what I'll have to do, I'll have to open the services.msc as an admin. So right click, run as an admin. um Now normal user won't be able to do this because obviously he's not an admin, right? But if an admin, I'm just trying to show you guys that the service exists, hence I'm logging into services.msc as an admin. So if I log into service, if I open this console as an admin, you see that Microsoft EPM agent service is present. It's automatic in running, but only an admin can see it. If you run as a normal user, the service won't show to you. Okay, all looks good. We have seen the registry, we have seen the scheduled task. Now let's take a look over a couple of other registries. So we are going to go to HKLM software, Microsoft, and enterprise desktop app management. So we will just expand this. And over here, if you see if any MSIs has been downloaded by this device, you will be able to see over here. So if I expand this SID inside of that MSI, now you see that there are three of the MSIs, right? So the first one, I'm going to look at the current download location and the download URL. So for the second one, you see it has downloaded something related to EPM agent. The third one is not related. So I'm just going to go to the second one and I'm going to see what this download URL is. I'm just going to copy this. And if I go to a website, okay, if I go to Edge, and if I just copy this, you see that from the browser as well, we'll be able to download the EPM agent. So this is what exactly it has downloaded. It has downloaded the EPM agent.msi, which you can do manually as well. So if I try to install it, well, obviously it's not going to work. Firstly, because I'm not an admin, so I won't be able to install anything manually. The Intune service was able to install it, but I won't be able to install this manually, but this is already installed. Okay, so this further shows that the EPM agent was correctly downloaded and installed because I'm able to see this registry entry showing that the MSI for EPM agent was downloaded by the device. Okay, now the next, and let's see the next entry, and the next entry is under HKLM software Microsoft EPM agent. So let's look for something called EPM agent here. Again, this entry was not present before. This key got created once the EPM agent got installed. This further shows that the EPM agent installation was done successfully. I can see an entry for EPM service and I can see an entry for policies. Right now it says that access is denied. Always a good idea when you're doing troubleshooting to run the registry editor as well as an admin, right? Because there are so many things that you won't be able to troubleshoot. And again, this is a troubleshooting being done by the admin and not by the end user who is an standard user in the device. So let's go to the same location again, Microsoft EPM agent. I expand this EPM service, doesn't have much, and then policies, expand this client settings, and then these are the client settings that we have already seen, right? So right now I don't see anything under any rules coming down to this device, and that is because we have not made any elevation rule policy. Once we make a elevation rule policy, we'll be able to see under EPM agent rule, there will be a node over here called rule lookup, and that rule lookup will have all the rules coming down to the device from the Intune service. Right now we don't have that, but presence of this key shows that the EPM agent was successfully installed in this device. Okay, and the next thing I would like to show you guys is the MDM diag logs. So I'm going to go to settings, accounts, access work or school, and let's quickly generate the MDM diag logs for us to take a look. So I'm just going to click on create report, and then we'll go to C drive users public documents. So let's go to C drive users public documents, MDM diagnostic log. Let's open this. Okay, so I have the MDM dialog open. If I scroll down under configuration source, I should be able to see the MMPC source over here. So if I go into the enrollment key again, over there we saw that this is the enrollment key for MMPC, right? And this was for Intune enrollment. Now for MMPC, the GUID is this. So if I copy this GUID, so if I come over here and do a control F with that ID, over here you can see that under configuration source, this is the configuration source and the configuration ID, we see entry for MMPC with this ID, right? Which further shows that the device is communicating with MMPC and getting whatever stuff it needs to download from there. Okay, so far so good. So part one is done, that is device is EPM enabled. Now what needs to be done is whitelisting of applications so that the end user can install the application that he needs to, because right now even the EPM agent is installed, I being the end user, I cannot install the 7-zip application, right? Because it's not whitelisted. So there is no point having EPM as of now. So let's go and do that. So I'm back at the portal right now, and at this point, if I check the first policy, that is EI demo elevation setting policy, the reporting for this also shows that the policy was successfully delivered to this device and to this user. Okay, all good. Now let's create a EPM rule policy. So we are going to click on create policy, and then again the same drill over here. We are going to select elevation rule, create, just giving this a name, next. Okay, and this is where I create a rule. I'm going to click on edit instance, and this is wherein the information I have to provide to whitelist a specific application. I have to make a specific rule. So we'll have to make a rule for each application. I mean, it depends on us how we want to make a rule. So we'll try out a different combination. The first thing I want to do is maybe make a rule for VLC media player. So let's call this a VLC media player rule. The description is optional. In the elevation type, we as of now have user confirmed and automatic. We don't have support approved as of now. It's just going to come in a couple of months. So for now, let me do user confirmed. Validation, we don't have MFA as of now. We just have business justification and Windows authentication. So I'm just going to select business justification for now. And then we have to name the file. So the name of the file has to be the exe that we are running, but as you can see, this is again not a mandatory parameter. Neither is the file path a mandatory parameter. So if I want, I can just leave these two as well. And now what happens is we'll have to find out how the operating system is going to recognize the application. Either the operating system is going to look for the certificate that has signed the application, which in our case is VLC media player. If not, then I can provide a file hash. So let's do the file hash first. So right now we are talking about the VLC media player application. So these are my list of applications. Let's take the name of the application quickly to show more options, rename. This is the name. So I'm just going to name this. Now file path, as you can see, is not mandatory. I'm going to leave that. and I'm just going to leave this not configured. Now I have to provide the file hash. Now I need to find the hash of this file, and it's very easy to do that. I just have to launch a PowerShell. Okay, there you go. Now I'm going to navigate to that file location and then use the command let get file hash, which is going to very easily give me that information. So get file hash and then the file, and then just pressing enter is going to give us the hash of the file. So this is how we get the file hash. Just going to copy this from here and going to paste this in our policy. All right, looks all good. I'm just going to click on save. Next, if we want, we can assign a scope tag to this as well, which I don't have to. Okay, so going to assign this to the EPM deployment group, select next and create. The rule for VLC media player right now is created, which means that if the end user tries to elevate himself and tries to install the VLC media player, he would be able to do that. However, for all the other application, he should be prohibited. So this is our EI demo elevation rule policy. As of now, you can see that it's set to yes. Let's wait for a couple of minutes and then we are going to switch back to the device and see the behavior. Okay, so been about 5 minutes that I ran a sync. So let's go back to the policy now. And yeah, now we see that the elevation rule policy has been successfully deployed to the device, which looks good from here. If I expand this, I can see all the settings that have come down as well. So now let me quickly switch back to the device, and seems there is some update pending. I don't want to do it right now. Okay, so let's open the registry again real quick as an admin and see whether the policy, the elevation rule policy is showing up in the registry or not. Okay, so I'm going to go to HKLM software, Microsoft, and then EPM agent. And since now the elevation rule policy is also targeted, now you see a node called rule lookup. So I'm going to expand that, and under file name, since we have applied the policy to VLC media player, over here we see the VLC media player policy that has come down. The main thing that this signifies is that the device has received the policy for VLC media player. And now if I go to the folder structure as well inside EPM agent policies, under elevation rule, I should be able to see a policy over here as well. And if I expand this, we can see that this elevation rule is for, over here you see the file name is vlcmediaplayer.exe. Okay, and this is a elevation rule hash algorithm. You can see the hash over here as well, and this hash matches with the hash that we have in the policy. So if I open up the policy real quick, you see this is the hash F4 ending with D4, and that is what we see over here, F4 ending with D4. Okay, looks all good. Okay, and the elevation type is also user confirmed. So in the registry, we see that the GUID is also the same. So inside policies, you see this value is 32 ending with f8.dat. And this is what we are seeing over here, 32 ending with f8, and this is a dat file. Okay. This is the extension, it's a .dat file, which means that, so by looking at this registry, making sure that this dat file is there, this node is created, as well as by looking at this log file, we can conclude that the policy for VLC media player has come down to the device successfully. Now there is no point for that policy to come down if the policy does not really take effect, right? So now let's see whether the policy takes effect or not. So I'm again going to go to temp and then EPM test files. If I double click on, if I right click and run the VLC media player as an administrator, it's going to ask me for the admin username and password. I am not an admin. I don't have the admin password. Therefore, this is not going to work. If I right click on this and click on run with elevated access, it should ask me for the business justification. It just asked me for that. So testing EPM EAI labs, EI labs. And now if I click on continue, the installation, there you go, the installation rightly starts. So if I do a next, install, the VLC media player is installing. Moral of the story is I am not an admin in the device, but I am able to install VLC media player in the device because VLC media player as an application has been whitelisted by the admin in the EPM policy. Therefore, when I try to elevate myself as a standard user to a admin, I am able to do that for the VLC Media Player application. However, what if I try to do the same thing for Notepad++? There you go. It tells us that your organization does not allow you to run this app as an administrator, because Notepad++ is not a whitelisted application. The same thing would be for Procmon as well. I have only whitelisted VLC Media Player, therefore only VLC Media Player is the application that is running as whitelisted. Any other application like 7-zip as well, it's not working. So only the application that are whitelisted, the end user can elevate to those applications. Now, since I have elevated to this application, let's go back to the portal and let's whitelist one more application. We'll do the same thing once again, but this time we will be checking the logs for that as well. Okay, now let's try and exempt Notepad++ by creating an elevation rule policy for that. We have already created one for VLC Media Player. Now we are going to create one for Notepad++. We always have an option of editing the existing policy as well and adding Notepad++ as a rule over there. But I just want to create a new one, a fresh one. So I'm going to create elevation rule policy over here. Just clicking on create, just let's name it, putting in a description. And we are going to click on edit instance, and this time for Notepad++, we are not going to use the file hash rule. We are rather going to use a certificate. So the rule name is mandatory. Let's call this Notepad++. The description is not mandatory. However, I'm just going to put in one. And the elevation type is going to be user confirmed. Validation is going to be business justification. I'll just leave the file name and file path for now. Over here, I'm going to select upload a certificate. But this means I need to upload the certificate which has signed the Notepad++ application. So over here, these are my applications, and for Notepad++ version 8.5.3, if I right click on the installer, go to show more options and then properties. If I go to digital signature, if I click on the Notepad++ and on details, then if I click on view certificate, and if I go to details, I have an option which says copy to file. So I'm just going to click on next, select the default x.509 DER encoded binary, click on next again. I'm just going to name the file and just save it in the desktop. And let's just save this over there. The export is successful. So if I go back to the desktop, I should be able to see the certificate over here. And there you go. We can see the Notepad++ signing certificate over here. Now I'm just going to upload the certificate into my policy. So let's go to the desktop again. Let's select the certificate and all good. In this option, the certificate type, I'm going to select publisher. Now, let's say that the certificate, before we understand this option, let's double click and open this certificate and see. Now this certificate is, if I go to the certification path, this is created by DigiCert root CA. Okay, and then there's a signing CA as well. So I just want to trust this certificate, the last certificate, which has a thumbprint of this A7BA6. And therefore I have uploaded that certificate over here. But let's assume that the signing authority is not DigiCert, but let's assume that the signing authority is our on-premise CA, which is used to sign all our on-premise LOB applications. Now we know and we trust our on-premise CA. So we can probably trust the root certificate of the on-premise CA so that we don't have to trust each signing certificate individually. What I mean by that is, let's say that this is the root certificate and now this is the signing certificate for Notepad++. Similarly, there will be a signing certificate for VLC Media Player, similarly one for 7-zip. But the root certificate will remain the same, which in our LOB's case is going to be the one of our root CA. So since we trust that, and we know that our root CA has only signed the applications which has been developed by our trusted partner, so we can directly upload this certificate to the portal. What this means is any application which has been signed by this certificate in its chain is going to be whitelisted and trusted. However, in our case, the root certificate is of DigiCert, and DigiCert is a third party public CA. So it's never a good idea to trust the root certificate of a public CA. Therefore, I am using the publisher option and not the root CA option. Again, in summary, the publisher option is to be used when I just want to trust the certificate which has signed a specific application, because the publisher certificate is going to change for each application. However, the root is going to remain same for a lot of certificates. So only trust the root when the root is your on-premise CA. If the root is not your on-premise, if the root is a public CA, then don't trust the root, trust the publisher. Okay. All right. So coming back to the portal here, the elevation type is fine. Everything is fine. The certificate has been uploaded. Certificate type is over here. We have to select publisher and not certificate authority. This would be the case if we were using, if you go to our documentation over there also, we have mentioned when to use publisher and when to use certificate authority. Okay, all good over here. Just going to click on save. And the assignment is done. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes and run a sync at the device end and wait for the policy to come down to the device. All right, so the policy is assigned. Just waited for a couple of minutes and ran a couple of sync. If I go back to the policy over here in the reporting as well, it shows that the policy was successfully delivered. Now, one other thing that I needed to show, if I go into the devices, this policies show as a device configuration profile. So if I go to the EPM demo policy, and if I go to the device configuration profile, I see that there are 3 policies deployed to it. One is the elevation setting policy, which is succeeded. This is the toggle on or off. And then for VLC media player, we created an elevation rule policy. And then for Notepad++, we created another elevation rule policy. So we see that all these 3 have been successfully deployed to the device. Now let's quickly go back to the device. Now, the first thing that we are going to check is we are going to go to C drive, program files, EPM agent, and we are going to go to the policies. And now under elevation rules, there should be 2 rules, one for VLC media player, which was there earlier, and now the newer one should be there for Notepad++. So I'm just opening that up, and if I just expand this, in this you see that the name Notepad++ is nowhere mentioned. It's in this policy. That is so because if I go and show you guys the policy, in the file name, I did not mention anything. Neither did I mention anything in the file path. Therefore, since the file name is not there, in the logs as well, the name is not showing up. You will see some difference between this one and the one for VLC media player. Now let's try and find out the difference. From policy perspective, what was the difference? The difference was for VLC media player, we had used hash. Therefore, you see hash over here. However, for Notepad++, we have not used hash. We have used a certificate. Therefore, instead of hash, you see a certificate payload over here. One more important difference, over here you don't see the name of the application. Over here you see there is an attribute called file name, and the file name is what I had mentioned in the portal, that is vlcmediaplayer.exe, right? But in this you don't see any file name. So this shows that the Notepad++ policy has also come down to the device. Now how do I substantiate that? Well, for that, there is only one way to know, right? We are going to go to Notepad++, right click on this. Earlier, when we right clicked and ran this with elevated access, it was blocked, right? Now let's see what's the experience. There you go. I'm still a standard user, but it is asking me for a business justification. Let's call this EAI demo of EPM. And then if I click on continue, it is going to launch the installer, and I should be able to finish the installation of this application. There you go. Notepad++ is installed. However, if I try and install 7-zip right now, run with elevated access, I still get the same error. Meaning VLC media player is whitelisted by using the hash of the application. Notepad++ is whitelisted by using the certificate that has, by using the publisher signing certificate. However, since 7-zip is not whitelisted, we as standard user are not able to install this application. Now, one other thing that I quickly wanted to show you in the registry is one more location. That is HKLM software Microsoft declared configuration, host OS config enrollment, and then inside the enrollment grid, inside the SID, we have to come to the key value. And over here, you see that there is this value. So let me just double click on this value. Let me just copy this and paste this in a notepad so that we can understand what this is saying. Now in this value, we see the certificate payload has this information, and this information that we are seeing in the registry, this coincides with the information that we saw inside the elevation rules folder in the DAT file. So let me double click and open this DAT file. So on the right hand side, you have the DAT file open, and in the DAT file, you see it contains information of the certificate payload starting with 866, ending with 77033. And on the left hand side, the value that we got from the registry, which also contains the certificate payload, which is 866 ending with 77033. What I mean by that is the information is written there in the registry for a specific application. In this case, the application is Notepad++, and the similar information is there in the DAT file as well. Now we'll find the same information for VLC media player application as well. So let's first open the DAT file for VLC media player, and over here you see the hash. And in the registry as well, that hash exists in key value under a different grid. If I double click and open this, let me just copy this again, and let me open a new tab. Let me paste it over here. Over here, you see this contains the hash value starting with F4, and this is the one that we got from registry, which is starting with F4. The point that I'm trying to make is the information that we are getting from the registry and the information that is there in the DAT file, both are the same, and we will have one registry grid for each application that we are trying to whitelist, and there will be a DAT file also for each application that we have whitelisted. Okay, now quickly taking a look over this diagram. Now what we have done until now is user is double clicking on an application wherein it's getting launched, or user is right clicking and running with an elevated access. However, let's say that I have an application which tries to call Notepad++ in elevated context, right? In that case also, the same experience is going to be there. Since Notepad++ is whitelisted, Notepad++ is going to get launched in admin context. However, if 7-zip is called in admin context, it's not going to launch because 7-zip is not whitelisted. So the experience that you see remains the same irrespective of whether you right click on it and try to elevate yourself to admin, or whether that binary is called by some other application automatically. Okay, now quickly talking from our troubleshooting perspective and making sure that everything is there in accordance. So this is exactly what we followed while we were tracking EPM, right? We made sure that the assignment was correct, the license was assigned, the device was meeting the prerequisite, the KB was installed that was needed to be, device was correctly enrolled in the second step, and then we checked the MMPC enrollment, we checked the task scheduler, we checked whether the enrollment registry for MMPC enrollment was getting created or not. We saw whether the agent was installed correctly or not. We saw the MSI reg entry key, and then we tried to download the EPM agent MSI from the URL of the web browser as well in Edge. And since that happened, we saw that in services.msc, the EPM service was also created when we launched the services.msc as an admin. And then we checked the registry as well for EPM agent, and we were able to see that all the policies that were created, may that be elevation setting policy or elevation rule policy, they were also coming down. And the last thing that we need to check right now is the EPM logs. So right now we are going to quickly switch again to the device, and now let's very quickly take a look over the EPM logs and see the processing that's happening over here. In this case, obviously we are not going to see any errors because, well, we know for sure that the policy is working fine from end user perspective, so the log is also going to be fine, but just something for us to keep in mind. So first, let's take a look over the EPM consent UI log. So let me go to the very top. So every time we launch an application that is not whitelisted, we get an error, right, which says that your organization does not allow you to run this app as an administrator. And you see that that is logged over here as well. It's in red But this is not exactly any error, right? This is just a message wherein the service is telling us that, okay, you know what, the application that you're trying to launch, that's not whitelisted. You cannot become an admin and launch this application. However, you can see that for VLC Media Player, I was able to do everything fine. And the same thing happened. Then I tried to launch 7-zip. I tried to launch Procmon. In all those cases, it failed. But when I tried to launch Notepad++ and when Notepad++ was whitelisted, everything happened absolutely fine in that case, right? So this is what we need to see in case of consent UI log to see whether there are many cases wherein the consent UI is not provided by the admin. Maybe the app is whitelisted, but the consent is not provided by the user who is trying to be admin, right? In that case also we need to check it. Now let's open the EPM agent log. This is the latest one. So let me go to the very top. So if we do a control F over here with the word VLC, we can see all the processing that is happening for this application. We can see things being fetched from the DAT file, things being fetched and written into the registry. The DAT file and the registry, both we have already seen. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see any errors in the logs because we know for sure that everything happened fine and the policy came down and it processed correctly. But this log is very useful for troubleshooting because we are going to see everything that is happening at the device end carried out by the EPM agent. May that be the fetching of the policy or may that be the implementation of the policy. Okay, now very quickly, let's try and make use of the EPM tools that we have. So for that, what we are going to do, we are going to go to the PowerShell in this device as an admin. And I'm going to browse to the EPM tools folder, and then I'm going to run the command import module and EPM commandlets.dll, and then let's do a get policies for client settings. So the policy type, client settings, and let's do a verbose. So this is telling me what is the behavior of EPM settings. This is not the rule policy. This is the EPM settings policy. And for us, we have enabled EPM. This is what we need to see as well. And the default behavior is decline elevation. So the EPM setting policy has been set for declining all the elevation, right? So quickly going back to the portal and showing you what that value is actually telling us. So it's telling us the value of this policy, that is the EPM elevation setting policy, which has been set to deny all request, right? That is exactly what we are seeing in the device as well. Default behavior is declining elevation. Okay, the telemetry level has been set to full and everything is looking good. Now let's see the elevation rule policy. So over here, I'm going to select elevation rule policy and then do a verbose again. And over here, you can see when we do an elevation rule policy, we see two rules. One rule is for VLC media player. The second rule is for blank. Well, why is it blank? As we've already seen, I did not provide a file name, right? But we know for sure that this is for Notepad++. And it's telling me the SID of the user as well as the last write version and the policy ID as well. Okay, so all looks good from here. Now let's quickly go back to the portal and then see how our reporting looks like. So if I go to report and if I go to elevation report, I don't see any information in the elevation report yet because this might take some time to populate. I see elevations that were done in different machines. So you see these are all different machines. My machine right now is named EPM demo. So I don't see anything from EPM demo over here. It might take a while to refresh, but this is wherein we are going to see all the processing related to reporting. So there is this website called Code for Cloud, and over here there are a couple of blogs on EPM, and it goes to very good depth on what is happening behind the hood as far as EPM deployment from Intune is concerned. It talks about the WPR trace as well as the registries that are involved, and as well as what is happening in the Procmon. So I would highly suggest going through this blog as well. There are a couple of variants of this blog. There is this other one which talks about the device health monitoring report and the service. So yeah, and the flow is also explained to a very good detail. So I would suggest checking out these two blogs as well, which is going to provide us added perspective onto the working of EPM. Okay, now we are going to take a look over this official documentation on EPM, which talks about few caveats related to EPM. Now, if we scroll down and go through this document, we see there are a few issues that are listed, and a lot of them have been fixed as well. And there are some suggestions as well to go along while we are doing EPM deployment in our organization. So first one, it says that using just the file name to whitelist an application is not recommended. It is always recommended to use a file hash or maybe a certificate. So it mentions the same thing over here. Always ensure that the rules include a file, that including a file name, other attributes are also used, right? And like a file hash or certificates. And if you are trying to run a file that is downloaded from the internet, it sometimes gives you a prompt saying that the file is blocked, and we'll have to right click, go to the properties, and unblock the file. This is a behavior of the operating system. Workplace joint devices not supported. By workplace join, we mean Azure AD registered and Intune enrolled, which signifies BYOD kind of a scenario. Now, for certification rules, if you have used publisher, everything works fine. If you have used certificate authority, then you might run into some errors, and this issue is going to be fixed in future release. And then I believe this one is fixed now. So right now my device is running with Windows 11, and in Windows 11, if I right click on this, you see that I see an option saying run with elevated access. But when EPM was in preview initially, then this option was not showing up over here. You would have to go to show more options, and then this option of run with elevated access would show up. That is what this point is telling us. EPM currently shows under show more option selection from the menu. This issue will be fixed in future release, and now this is fixed. So now when we just go to the just when we right click on the exe, it shows us the option. Okay, and SSL inspection is still not supported. Make sure that there are no SSL inspection turned on for all the EPM related endpoints.
Now, one other important point is the support for other applications. So as of now, EPM only has support for EXEs as it is listed over here. Very soon, as per the documentation, the support is going to be extended for MSIs and for some system apps as well. So let me show you guys an example from my test device.
Right now I'm in this machine wherein I have whitelisted the task manager exe. So if you right click on this, and if you go to show more options, or over here itself, it says that run with elevated access. And if I provide justification over here, and if I click on continue, then in task manager over here runs with elevated access. If you go to details, and then if you take a look over task manager, over here you see task manager, under username you see it's running with the Azure AD underscore nugget underscore $, which signifies this is running using the virtual account. This is the name of the user is nugget, but it is running with nugget underscore $, which is a virtual admin account. So just like task manager, we can do that for the settings app as well, and test it out. So these are some system related applications for which EPM can also be used. So this is also a exe. So if I go to view, and if I go to file name extensions, you see there's system settings.exe. So I can find out the file hash or the certificate that is used for this application by going to digital signature. You already know how to find this, and I can just copy this to a file, upload this to the portal, and whitelist the system settings.exe app, just like I have done it for task manager. So this documentation is very handy, very helpful, and it talks about some issues that we might run into while we are deploying EPM in our organization. So that's pretty much it, guys. And this is the first video that I have done on Intune Advanced Suite on EPM. And I intend to do a lot more on the other components of the Intune Advanced Suites, like the Advanced App Management, Cloud PKI, and Remote Help and stuff like that. So I hope that this was interesting. And the reason why I think this is going to be a game changer is because we have seen that organizations are making use of third-party applications to cater to this functionality. And now, given that Microsoft is providing this first party, I don't see any reason why this is not going to be implemented in all the organizations across, because no IT administrator wants that the end user should have admin privileges on the device. But if you guys remember, we need to balance and manage the scale as well. We need to keep the users happy so that they are productive. That's pretty much it, guys. I hope that this has been informative. I would like to thank you for viewing. This is your friend Saurabh Sarkar signing off.